What happens when someone you've mourned for 20 years walks through the door holding evidence that changes everything? Stop the tape. Stop everything right now. Dr. Phil's voice cut through the studio like a knife. The cameras kept rolling for 3 more seconds before the director understood. This wasn't part of the show. The man standing in the doorway, clutching a manila envelope with shaking hands, was supposed to be dead. What happened in the next 17 minutes would become the most watched moment in Dr. Phil history. The episode had started like any other. Today we're talking about unresolved grief, Dr. Phil announced to the studio audience, his voice carrying that familiar blend of authority and compassion. My guest, Marcus Henderson, lost his younger brother 20 years ago in what authorities ruled as a hiking accident. Marcus has never been able to move forward. Marcus sat in the guest chair, a 42-year-old man whose eyes carried 2 decades of weight. His wife Sarah sat beside him, holding his hand. They'd come to the show as a last resort. Marcus's depression had become unbearable, affecting their marriage, his relationship with their teenage daughter, everything. Tell me about that day, Dr. Phil said gently, leaning forward in his chair. Marcus took a shaky breath. David was 23. I was 25. We went hiking in the Cascades. Something we'd done 100 times before. He was supposed to meet me at the summit, but he never showed. Search and rescue found his backpack near a cliff edge 3 days later. His wallet, his phone, everything was still inside. Blood on the rocks. They said he must have fallen. But Marcus never saw a body. And that fact had haunted him every single day since. You never got closure, Dr. Phil said, not as a question but as a statement of fact. How can you get closure when there's no funeral? No body? No grave to visit? Marcus's voice cracked. For 20 years I've had dreams that he's still out there. That he's calling for me. That he needs help and I'm not there. Sarah squeezed his hand tighter. The audience was silent, many wiping tears from their eyes. Dr. Phil opened his mouth to respond when a producer's voice came through his earpiece. He paused, his expression changing in a way that 20 years of television had trained him to control. But this time, he couldn't. His eyes widened. His hand went to his ear, pressing the earpiece deeper. What? He said out loud, forgetting for a moment he was on camera. Say that again. The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. Something was happening off-script. Marcus, Dr. Phil stood up, his voice suddenly urgent. I need you to stay exactly where you are. Sarah, hold his hand. Don't let go. What's happening? Marcus asked, his face pale with sudden fear. Dr. Phil turned to the cameras, then to his director in the booth. Stop recording. I mean it. Stop everything right now. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the red lights on the cameras blinked off. The studio, which moments before had been humming with the energy of live taping, fell into an eerie silence. Phil, what's going on? Marcus was standing now, despite Dr. Phil's instruction. What did they tell you? Dr. Phil walked to the edge of the stage, speaking to someone in the wings that the audience couldn't see. His voice was low but urgent. The studio audience began whispering among themselves. This wasn't like any episode they'd ever attended. Then the side door of the studio opened. A man stepped through. He was thin, wearing clothes that looked like they'd been traveled in for days. His face was weathered, aged beyond what his years should show, but there was no mistaking the bone structure, the eyes, the way he moved. Marcus made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. His knees buckled. Sarah caught him, but she was staring too, her mouth open in shock. The man in the doorway was holding a manila envelope. His hands were shaking so badly the envelope rattled. Marcus, the man said, and his voice broke on the single word. Marcus, I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil moved quickly, positioning himself between the brothers, because that's what they were, though Marcus still couldn't seem to process it. David? He whispered. David, you died. You fell. They found blood. They found your things. I staged it, David said, and the words came out in a rush, like a confession he'd been holding for 2 decades. The accident, the blood, it was all staged. I needed everyone to think I was dead. The envelope in his hands rattled harder. Dr. Phil reached out and steadied David's wrist. Take your time, he said quietly. We're not going anywhere. Why? Marcus's voice was raw with 20 years of grief transforming into something else. Anger, confusion, relief, all at once. Why would you do that to me? To Mom and Dad? They died thinking you were gone. Dad had a heart attack 3 years after you died. Do you know that? Do you have any idea what you did to us? David's face crumpled. Tears streamed down his cheeks. I was in trouble, Marcus. Bad trouble. I'd witnessed something I shouldn't have. There were people looking for me, dangerous people. The kind that don't just hurt you, they hurt everyone you love. I thought if everyone believed I was dead, they'd stop looking. You'd all be safe. That's insane, Marcus said, but his anger was cracking, giving way to something deeper. You could have told me. You could have. I couldn't risk it, David interrupted. If you knew, they might have figured it out. I couldn't take that chance with your life. Or Sarah's. Or your daughter's. He looked at Sarah then, recognizing her from photographs, from the life Marcus had built without him. I've been following you from a distance. I know about Emma. I know she's 16 now. I know she's on the swim team. I know everything, and I've missed everything. The studio was so quiet you could hear the HVAC system humming. Dr. Phil, who had counseled thousands of people through thousands of situations, stood silently. This was beyond his training, beyond his scripts. This was a moment that required nothing but space. Marcus moved first. He crossed the distance between them in 3 steps and grabbed the envelope from David's hands. What is this? Evidence, David said. The people who were after me, they're gone now. Arrested, convicted, some dead. I've been working with federal prosecutors for the last year. It's finally over. It's finally safe. He gestured to the envelope. That's proof. Case files, testimony records, everything. I needed to show you I wasn't just running away. I needed you to understand. Marcus opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were dozens of pages. Legal documents, photographs, news clippings about a massive organized crime takedown. His eyes scanned the pages, barely able to focus through his tears. I watched Dad's funeral from a car 3 blocks away, David whispered. I watched Mom's funeral from behind a tree in the cemetery. I've been to Emma's swim meets. I was there when she won state championships. I've been right there, Marcus. Right there the whole time, and it's been killing me. Then Marcus did something no one expected. He dropped the envelope. The papers scattered across the stage floor. And he pulled his brother into an embrace so fierce, so desperate, that both men collapsed to their knees. The sound that came from Marcus was primal. 20 years of grief, rage, relief, and love all released at once. David clung to him, sobbing into his shoulder, repeating, "I'm sorry," over and over like a mantra. Dr. Phil knelt beside them. He placed one hand on Marcus's shoulder, one on David's. "This is real," he said quietly. "He's really here." Sarah had moved from her chair and was kneeling on Marcus's other side, her hand on his back. Tears streamed down her face. In the audience, there wasn't a dry eye. Several people had stood up without realizing it, hands pressed to their mouths or hearts. The cameras were still off, but this moment was being witnessed by over 200 people in that studio. It would become the story they told for the rest of their lives. The day they saw a dead man return, the day they watched 20 years of grief transform into something else. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. After several minutes, Dr. Phil helped both brothers to their feet. Marcus still held on to David like he might disappear if he let go. Dr. Phil turned to his director. Are we recording? The director shook his head. Good. Keep it that way. Dr. Phil addressed the audience directly. What you just witnessed is private. This family needs time before this becomes public. I'm asking each of you, and I'm trusting you, to give them that time. Can you do that? The audience nodded, murmured agreements. They understood they'd been part of something sacred. Dr. Phil turned back to the brothers. Marcus, I'm going to make some calls. There are people who need to know about this. Authorities, yes, but also grief counselors who specialize in complicated situations like this. David, you're going to need support too. This isn't something you can just get over. And Sarah. He looked at Marcus's wife. You're going to need help processing this as well. This impacts everyone. Marcus finally found his voice. How do I tell Emma? How do I tell our daughter that her uncle she's never known, that we told her was dead, is actually alive? Together. Dr. Phil said simply. You tell her together. As a family. Because that's what you are now. A family that's whole again, but different. And different isn't wrong. It's just different. David picked up the scattered papers from the envelope, gathering them carefully. I have more, he said. Evidence, but also letters. I wrote you letters, Marcus. Hundreds of them over 20 years. I never sent them. I couldn't. But I kept them. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time I wanted to call you, I wrote instead. I want to read them. Marcus said immediately. All of them. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Dr. Phil escorted the brothers and Sarah off the stage through the side door. The audience remained seated, still processing what they'd witnessed. Several producers stood in the wings, wiping tears from their own eyes. In a private room backstage, away from cameras and crew, Dr. Phil sat with the three of them for another hour. They talked about next steps. Family therapy, individual counseling for David's PTSD and Marcus's complicated grief, how to reintegrate someone who'd been dead back into a life that had moved forward without them. This isn't going to be easy, Dr. Phil told them honestly. You're going to have moments of anger, Marcus. You have every right to be angry. And David, you're going to have to live with what you did, the choices you made. Both of you are going to need help processing this. But we'll do it together, Marcus said, still holding his brother's hand like he used to when they were kids. Yes, Dr. Phil agreed. You'll do it together. Before they left, Dr. Phil pulled David aside privately. What you did, choosing to disappear to protect your family, some people might say that's noble. But it also caused tremendous pain. You can't undo that. You can only move forward honestly. I know, David said quietly. That's why I came back now, even though it's terrifying. I couldn't let him live the rest of his life thinking I abandoned him. I'd rather face his anger than let him believe that lie anymore. Dr. Phil nodded. That's the first step toward healing. 3 months later, Dr. Phil received a letter. It was from Emma, Marcus and Sarah's daughter. She wrote about meeting her Uncle David for the first time, about how weird and wonderful and complicated it was. She wrote about her dad's smile being different now, still sad sometimes, but also lighter. She wrote about David teaching her the constellations their grandfather had taught him before he died. Dr. Phil, she wrote, I know you stopped the cameras that day. My parents told me. Thank you for giving us privacy when we needed it most. Thank you for treating this like a family moment instead of just a show. Dr. Phil kept that letter on his desk. It reminded him why he did this work. Not for the ratings or the viral moments, but for the times when he could actually make a difference in someone's life. The times when stopping the cameras mattered more than rolling them. The episode that day never aired. But the story spread anyway. People who'd been in the audience told their families, who told their friends. The story evolved, got embellished, became almost mythical, the day Dr. Phil stopped recording because a dead man walked in with proof he was alive. But for Marcus, Sarah, David, and Emma, it wasn't a story. It was their life. It was the day their family was shattered and reassembled into something new. It was the day grief transformed into reunion, anger into forgiveness, death into life. And it was the day Dr. Phil proved that sometimes, the most important moments happen when the cameras are off. The envelope David brought that day sits in Marcus's home office now, in a frame on his desk. He doesn't look at the documents inside anymore. He's memorized them. But the envelope itself serves as a reminder. Truth, no matter how painful or complicated, is better than the alternative. Love, no matter how tested, can survive even 20 years of absence. And family, even when broken, can find a way to heal. Dr. Phil still thinks about that day too. In 20-plus years of television, through thousands of guests and stories, that moment stands out. Not because it was dramatic, though it was. Not because it was emotional, though it was that too. But because it was real in a way that transcended television. We help people every day, Dr. Phil told his staff afterward. But some days we witness miracles. And when we do, our job is just to get out of the way. That's what he did that day. He got out of the way and let a family reunite. He protected their privacy when he could have exploited their pain. He chose humanity over ratings, connection over content. And in doing so, he reminded everyone in that studio, and everyone who eventually heard the story, what really matters. Not the show, not the cameras, not the audience. The people. Always the people.